Hey, welcome back. I am here today with our author of the week, Richard E. McCullough, who's written a book called One Man in His Time, and it's a biography of your dad, Lorance McCullough. What made you decide to write about your dad?
Well, many years ago, I got interested in researching our family tree, and during doing that, I found out my great-grandfather fought in the Civil War. In doing this, in discovering what he did during the war, and then after the war moving to Texas, I thought it would be fascinating if he had written down a lot of his experiences to hand down through the family. It would have been fascinating to read about that. Since my father participated in World War II, I thought, World War II was probably the most destructive, defining event of the entire 20th century. And I thought, I grew up knowing a lot of World War II veterans, but my kids don't, and my grandkids certainly won't. And I thought, well, maybe I should record his experiences during the war to hand down through the family. After I started writing those, it got to be so involved, I thought, well, if I'm going to write that, I might as well just write the whole story.
Oh, I see. So it began with as a war memoir.
Yes.
Now, did you have letters from your dad that he had written at that time, or other bits of information to work from?
My father was kind of a pack rat. He saved just about every scrap of paper that he had from World War II. I've even got the receipt that he signed when he was issued his parachute. There's receipts from the base laundry and stuff like that, but all of his official records and papers, I still have those, all of his uniforms, his medals. He kept just about everything he had from the war, and so I had a great deal of material to draw on.
Okay. One of the things that I enjoyed about the book the most was the going back a little bit farther, even before your dad's time. And you mentioned that there was a time that Quanah Parker's tribe actually camped on your family's farm. How did that come about? I mean, how was that? Was he a friend of your family's?
Yes, my grandfather purchased a quarter section of land in the big pasture in 1907 in the land lottery. And where his farm was situated was a half a mile from the Red River. And he also farmed several Indian leases in the surrounding area. And by doing this, he became acquainted with Quanah Parker and became a close friend of his. And when the Quanah Parker's tribe would move south for the winter, he would allow them to camp on his farm to rest and make ready for the river crossing, and that's how they became close friends.
Okay. Now, the family in its earlier days was kind of colorful in some ways. We think of some of the things that your family was involved in as being defining elements of the Old West. There was some bootlegging involved in there. There was even well, I don't know if you'd call it a gunfight, but there was a shooting. Tell us a little bit about that, because I found that to be a sad and as you used the word defining a minute ago, a defining moment in family history.
Yes, my grandfather, after they from Granfield, he sold some oil leases for a lot of money, and then he bought a farm at Tipton, Oklahoma. That was a small town in Tillman County that his wife was from. While he was there, he had an older brother that lived a mile from him. And while living there, relations between the two became bad. And it culminated in a shooting in Tipton in which my grandfather was killed. That was a very devastating blow to my family. My father and his sister and brother never really got over that, and I can tell that it affected the family greatly.
Yeah, your dad was what, 9 when that happened?
He was 9 years old
when that happened.
When he lost his father. Yes.
Yeah, I can see. And I mentioned bootlegging in there, but actually you had a relative who drove. Who you didn't?
Yeah.
The family didn't actually manufacture.
No, my father's brother Cecil. He was 10 years older than my dad. And during Prohibition, he was a bootlegger. He drove a car and carried hooch through the delivery chain in southwest Oklahoma. And it's funny, there's a story told in the family how one Saturday His car was broke down, so he borrowed his mother's black sedan to make his booze run that night. The next morning, my grandmother and my father and his sister went out to get in the car to go to church, and all of a sudden my grandmother ordered everybody out of the car and back into the house. She was upset. She wasn't about to go to church because she noticed 2 bullet holes in the back glass of the car window. So he had some pretty colorful adventures while doing that, yeah.
Okay. Well, he was probably a hero in that part of the country then. Now, just as there had been bad blood between your granddad and his brother, there was also some hard feelings between your dad and his brother, your Uncle Cecil, right?
Yes. Well, my Uncle Cecil was what you'd call a functioning alcoholic. He started drinking alcohol as a teenager, started smoking when he was 12. He was a pretty rough, colorful character, and he was 10 years older than my father, so there was quite an age gap. And of course, my father wanted to tag along and be with him, but he didn't like that and wouldn't permit that. And there was some, you know, some bad episodes between the two. And as they got older, his brother became more dictatorial, and, you know, he was the little bitty brother, and he wanted to tell him what to do and stuff like that. And so relations weren't always the best.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your dad's service during the war. He was a flyer, and he was the chief navigator in his group.
Yes.
Now that seems like it would be a pretty important position. Tell us about that.
Yes, he was what they call the lead navigator. He was in the 447th Bomb Group, and there's 4 squadrons that make a bomb group. And during his service, he was asked to be the lead navigator, and the lead navigator flies in the lead plane in the formation and actually navigates for the entire group. The rest of the navigators just keep track of their position so that in case they have to drop out of formation, they can make their way home. But he's responsible for distributing maps with the plotted courses and everything to all the navigators, and he also radios back every 15 minutes their position so headquarters can see, you know, the progress of the mission. Also, it was kind of a dangerous spot to be in because also the best bombardier in the group would be in the lead plane, because the bombardier in the lead plane did the target aiming for the entire group. So when the lead plane dropped its bombs, everyone dropped their bombs. They would watch. Well, the enemy knew this, and so enemy fighters tended to concentrate on the lead ships. And so he endured his share of fighter attacks from Me-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s. On one mission, his plane's tail was shot up pretty bad, and when they landed at the air base, the tail elevator fell off on the runway.
Oh, my. And he was not an old man when he was doing this, right? That's a lot of responsibility, but he was the oldest man on the plane, wasn't he?
Yes, he was 25 years old. The rest of his crew was from 18 to 22 years old. His pilot was 22 years old, and one of the waist gunners was 18. His nickname was Mac. They called him Mac, but a lot of them referred to him as the old man.
At 25.
Yeah, 25.
At 25. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Well, let's go after the war now. Your dad died in 1976. He was a young man when he passed.
Yes.
Why did you wait so long to write about him?
Well, I'm not sure. A lot of these stories have kind of been swirling in my head for years, and you know, every family kind of has someone that's the family historian that keeps track of all this and keeps up on it, and I'm kind of that for my family. I've always told these stories off and on to members of the family, just certain stories, but when I sat down to write his war record, then I finally realized, you know, if I'm going to do this, I need to put the entire story down. Okay,
Richard, and it is a fascinating story. I hope people will read it. There's a lot to learn about early Oklahoma, about living on a farm, growing up on a farm, and about the war. It's One Man in His Time by Richard E. McCullough. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, folks.